The rooftop bar was alive with the chatter of Atlanta's wealthy elite, but one voice suddenly cut through the noise. "If you can sing this song," Martin Crosswell announced, tapping his glass for silence, "I'll give you $1 million. The crowd erupted in laughter. They thought it was a joke. To them, Martin's cruel humor was nothing new. The millionaire loved humiliating people, especially those he saw as outsiders in his glittering world. But this time, his target was not a businessman or a rival socialite. It was a child. A 12-year-old black girl stood frozen near the grand piano, her wide eyes locked on him. Her name was Amara Johnson. She didn't belong in that bar, not according to the rules of wealth and status. And that was exactly why Martin chose her. The atmosphere shifted from light-hearted to tense. Some people smiled nervously, waiting for the entertainment to begin. Others pulled out their phones, eager to record what they thought would be another one of Martin's infamous spectacles. Martin leaned back, confident and smug, and let his fingers fall on the piano keys. The first notes echoed like a warning. The song was not just difficult, it was infamous. It was Strange Fruit, a haunting anthem that carried the weight of America's darkest history. Why this song? Because Martin knew it would be impossible for a child to carry the pain in those lyrics. That was the point. He wanted her to stumble. He wanted her to break. All eyes turned to Amara. She stood small and trembling, her hands clutched together, her breath shallow. The room was silent now. The laughter had faded into anticipation. And somewhere inside her she had to decide, would she step forward or let this man's arrogance define her? Imagine being that child. 100 eyes staring. A powerful man mocking you. Would you dare open your mouth? Would you risk it? The piano notes grew louder, demanding an answer. Amara took a single step forward. Her lips parted. Her voice was about to change everything. But who was this girl, and why did her voice silence an entire room? To understand that moment, we need to go back a few hours earlier. It was a gray Saturday afternoon in Atlanta. The sky hung low with clouds, and the streets below buzzed with the sounds of weekend traffic. Honking horns, vendors calling out, the hum of the city alive. Inside the high-rise building that overlooked the skyline, Amara's mother, Denise Johnson, was finishing another shift as a cleaner. She often brought Amara with her because she couldn't always afford a babysitter. For Amara, these visits were routine, quiet afternoons where she would wait patiently, sketching in her notebook or humming to herself while her mother worked. But that day was different. That day, Amara's curiosity pulled her into the rooftop bar where Martin Crosswell was entertaining his wealthy friends. The bar was a different world, golden lights, leather chairs, the clinking of expensive glasses, and a piano glowing in the corner. For Amara, it was like stepping into a dream. Her eyes locked onto the piano. She had never seen one so beautiful, polished and waiting, as if calling her name. She moved closer, her small fingers hovering near the keys but not daring to touch them. That's when Martin noticed her. He leaned back in his chair, swirling a glass of bourbon, and smirked. To him, Amara was out of place. She wasn't a guest, she wasn't dressed in silk or diamonds, she was just the cleaner's child, standing where she didn't belong. And Martin hated that. He thrived on control. He loved reminding people of their place. And now he had the perfect opportunity. The crowd didn't know Amara's story. They didn't see her as a child who dreamed of music, who spent nights singing softly to herself while her mother worked late. To them, she was just an awkward interruption in their glamorous night. But Martin saw more than an interruption. He saw a stage. And he was ready to make her the centerpiece of his next cruel game. He tapped his glass, called for silence, and prepared to deliver the taunt that would ignite a firestorm no one could have predicted. And that's how the game began. A child's curiosity. A millionaire's arrogance. Two lives about to collide in a way that would expose everything he wanted to hide. She didn't know the man watching her had a plan to humiliate her in front of everyone. Martin Crosswell was not just rich. He was the kind of rich that made people laugh at his jokes even when they weren't funny. He was the kind of rich that turned cruelty into entertainment. Everyone in Atlanta's high society knew his reputation, throwing parties where humiliation was part of the show. And tonight, his target was Amara. She was small, barely 12, standing near the piano like a misplaced shadow. Martin's eyes narrowed as he studied her. She wasn't dressed in pearls or satin gowns. She wore a faded t-shirt and sneakers. Her hair was braided simply. Everything about her screamed, "She doesn't belong here." That was all the excuse he needed. "Ladies and gentlemen," Martin called, clinking his glass again. The crowd turned, obedient as ever. "It seems we have entertainment." A ripple of chuckles ran through the bar. People leaned forward, curious. Phones angled discreetly toward Amara. Martin rose from his leather chair with a theatrical flair, moving toward the piano. He played a few random notes, letting them echo before he glanced at the girl. "You like music, don't you?" His voice dripped with mockery. Amara froze. Her mother shifted uneasily in the back, clutching a cleaning rag against her chest. But Martin didn't wait for an answer. He thrived on tension. "If you can sing this song," he sneered, "I'll give you $1 million." The bar erupted with laughter. $1 million? It was ridiculous. Everyone assumed it was a joke, another one of Martin's tricks. But Amara didn't laugh. She just stared at him wide-eyed as if trying to decide whether he was serious, or if this was a trap. Martin sat down at the piano and with deliberate cruelty he began to play. The melody he chose wasn't just difficult. It was cruel. Strange Fruit. A song born from pain, from injustice, from blood on trees and shadows on the ground. A song Billie Holiday once sang like a dagger in America's conscience. The moment the first notes floated through the air, the room's laughter thinned. People knew that song. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't light-hearted anymore. Martin grinned. That was exactly why he chose it. He knew this child couldn't possibly carry its weight. This was his game: create impossible odds, watch someone fail, and then laugh at their collapse. But tonight the rules were about to break. Amara's mother whispered desperately from the back, "Amara, don't." But it was too late. The stage had been set. With a sly grin, Martin chose the cruelest song possible. The opening chords of Strange Fruit lingered in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. No one spoke. No one dared. Even the laughter had evaporated. Amara stood frozen. Her chest rose and fell as though she was trying to push courage into her lungs. "Go on," Martin urged, smiling like a predator. "Sing." She hesitated. Her throat felt tight. For a moment it looked like she might run. The audience leaned forward, some hoping for a train wreck, others silently praying she'd surprise them. Finally, she opened her mouth. The first note slipped out, fragile and trembling. A few people chuckled, assuming this would be quick. But Amara didn't stop. She closed her eyes, gripped the edge of the piano, and reached deeper. Her voice shifted, soft at first, then stronger. Every word carried a weight far beyond her years. "Southern trees bear a strange fruit." The bar went silent. Forks hovered midair. Glasses froze in people's hands. How could a child sound like that? Her tone wasn't polished. It wasn't perfect, but it was raw. It carried sorrow, anger, and defiance. She didn't just sing the lyrics, she resurrected them. The pain of generations seemed to rise through her voice. The cruelty of the past poured into every line. People who had come to drink and gossip now found themselves holding their breath, caught in the gravity of her performance. Martin's smug grin faltered. Just slightly. He wasn't expecting this. The song filled every corner of the bar, every crack in the golden walls. Even the city skyline outside seemed to pause. And here's what you need to understand. This wasn't just a song. It was history itself, spilling from the lungs of a child who should have been invisible. But when injustice tries to silence you, sometimes your voice comes out louder than ever. By the second verse, even the most skeptical faces in the crowd were changed. A man lowered his phone, no longer interested in recording humiliation. A woman wiped a tear she didn't expect. Amara's mother covered her mouth, shaking. She had heard her daughter sing at home, but never like this. Every lyric hung heavy. Every note cut deeper. The room, once filled with arrogant laughter, now belonged entirely to her. And when the final haunting words left her lips, silence followed. The kind of silence that screams louder than applause. All eyes turned back to Martin. He had felt the pressure would be too much for her, and for a moment he was right. For a moment, Amara's voice was barely more than a whisper. Her first notes trembled like glass on the edge of breaking. Some in the crowd smirked. A few even laughed under their breath, ready to dismiss her. They thought the game was already over. But Amara didn't back down. She clutched the piano tighter, closed her eyes, and let the sound grow. Her voice climbed from fragile to steady, from small to piercing. The room shifted. The smirks disappeared. By the second line, something began to stir in her audience, an uncomfortable recognition. The song was no longer a child's attempt. It was a haunting performance that dragged every soul in that room into the history Martin had tried to use as a weapon. Blood on the leaves and blood at the root. The words poured out, trembling but fierce. She wasn't just singing, she was channeling something ancient, something buried deep in the soil of the South. Her mother's hands shook as she clasped them together. She knew Amara had talent, yes. She had heard her sing at home in whispers in church pews. But this was different. This was her daughter's soul catching fire in front of strangers who never expected her to shine. Some guests looked away, ashamed to be part of the spectacle. Others leaned closer, pulled in against their will. And Martin? His smile twitched. He told himself she would crack any second. He wanted her to collapse. But the longer she sang, the more his certainty began to waver. Have you ever seen a child push back against a world that told them no? It doesn't come as anger. It comes as courage. Quiet at first, then louder, until it can't be ignored. Amara's voice rose again, carrying pain too heavy for her small frame. By now no one laughed. The entire bar had gone still. The only sound was her song, fragile yet unbreakable. She sang like a storm about to break. The audience leaned forward, realizing this was no ordinary child. The deeper Amara went into the song, the more the atmosphere changed. She wasn't singing notes anymore. She was painting pictures with her voice, pictures of dark trees, of shadows swaying in silence, of blood-staining southern roots. The wealthy crowd that had come for drinks and laughter now found themselves trapped inside the history she carried. Some couldn't hold her gaze. Others sat frozen, caught between discomfort and awe. A woman dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. A man shifted in his seat, his jaw clenched as though the words had struck him personally. Amara's small frame shook, but her voice refused to break. With every word she seemed to grow taller, more powerful. Martin leaned back in his chair, fingers tightening against the polished armrests. He wanted to laugh, to roll his eyes, to dismiss her. But he couldn't. Her voice forced him to listen. This wasn't just a performance. It was a reckoning. A child with no stage, no spotlight, no microphone, was holding a room full of power hostage with nothing but her voice. Even the city outside felt quieter. The skyline lights glowed through the windows, but inside, the room belonged entirely to Amara. Her mother covered her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. Pride and fear collided inside her. Pride that her daughter was shining. Fear of what Martin might do when his game backfired. When Amara hit the final haunting notes, the silence that followed was louder than applause. Not a glass clinked. Not a whisper stirred. The weight of the song pressed against every chest in the room. It was as if Billie Holiday herself had risen to remind them all of the pain this country tried to bury. Martin forced a smirk, ready to dismiss the moment, ready to reclaim control. But before he could, something unexpected happened. A gray-haired man rose slowly from the corner of the room. His face was pale, his eyes wet. His hands trembled as he pointed at Amara. "That's impossible," he whispered. His voice shook, almost breaking. "That was my mother's exact arrangement. She only taught it to family." The bar erupted in gasps. The man in the corner stood trembling, his voice cracked by disbelief. His name was Harold Whitmore, a retired music professor and a man rarely shaken by anything. But what he had just heard from a 12-year-old girl's mouth was not just rare, it was impossible. "That arrangement," he said again, stumbling forward. "It's hers. My mother's. She created it in the 1940s, performed it once, and swore she'd never sing it again. She carried it to her grave. No one else knew it. No one." The room held its breath. Some exchanged puzzled glances. Others squinted, trying to understand the gravity of what he was saying. Denise Johnson, Amara's mother, rose halfway from her chair, her face pale. She wanted to shield her daughter, but Harold's words had already pierced through the night. How would my child know that?" she whispered. Amara clutched the side of the piano, confused and frightened. She hadn't studied music formally. She hadn't read sheet music or memorized arrangements. She only sang what poured out of her heart. Harold's eyes filled with tears. It wasn't just the notes. It was the phrasing. The way she held the word fruit, the hesitation before breeze. That was my mother's soul written into sound. There's no way she could know it. Murmurs rippled across the room. People who minutes ago had treated Amara like a spectacle now leaned forward, hungry for answers. Martin Croswell slammed his glass down, his voice sharp. "Enough of this nonsense." She mimicked what she's heard. "That's all. Children repeat things. Don't romanticize it." But even as he spoke, his words sounded hollow. He had expected Amara to embarrass herself. Instead, she had stunned the crowd into silence, and now a stranger's testimony threatened to unravel the entire game. And here's the truth Martin could never admit. He wasn't in control anymore. The crowd wasn't laughing with him. They were questioning him, watching him, doubting him. Harold shook his head firmly. "You don't understand. My mother performed that version one time, in a private circle of activists who risked their lives in the South. No recordings. No sheet music. Just her voice. It was supposed to die with her." He turned to Amara, his eyes softening. "Child, where did you learn this?" Amara's lips trembled. She looked to her mother, searching for an answer she didn't have. I just sang it," she whispered. The crowd gasped. A storm was brewing, not outside in the gray city sky, but inside the very heart of that room. And Denise Johnson, clutching her chest, suddenly realized she had heard this voice before, but not from her daughter. Denise Johnson froze, her breath short, her thoughts spiraling back to a past she had tried to bury. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be. And yet, as Amara's final note echoed in her ears, Denise remembered something that had haunted her for years. A dream. Not just any dream, a recurring one. A woman singing in shadows, her voice trembling with sorrow and strength. The melody had seeped into Denise's sleep so often that she'd woken with tears on her cheeks. For years she thought it was just her imagination, the echo of history pressing down on her spirit as a black woman raising a child alone. But now, hearing Amara, she realized it wasn't a dream at all. It was a memory passed down, somehow, someway, into her daughter's voice. The bar grew restless. Whispers rose like smoke. People wanted answers. "Tell us," one man urged. "How does she know this?" Denise's voice cracked. "I don't know." Her hands shook as she reached for Amara. "Baby, you've never heard that song from me, have you?" Amara shook her head. "No, Mama. I just felt it, like it was already inside me." Harold's face went pale. "Then it's true. My mother's spirit, her arrangement, lives in her." The room erupted. Some gasped in awe. Some whispered words like reincarnation and ancestral memory. A woman in pearls clutched her husband's arm and muttered, "This is unnatural." Martin, growing more furious, stood tall and barked, "Enough of this circus. She's a child, nothing more. Don't turn this into some fairy tale." But even he knew the energy had shifted. The game was no longer about humiliation. It was about revelation. Imagine standing there, accused of carrying the past in your lungs. You don't understand it. You can't explain it. Yet everyone demands an answer. That was Amara's reality, an impossible weight on a 12-year-old girl's shoulders. Denise wrapped her arm around Amara, her voice trembling. "Leave her alone. She's just a child." But Harold wouldn't back down. His eyes burned with both fear and fascination. "She's not just a child. She's the echo of something bigger. Something this man," he pointed at Martin, "tried to turn into a joke." The crowd gasped again, their eyes swinging back to Martin. Martin's face reddened. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not in his own world. For the first time, the hunter looked like the hunted. And that's when a journalist in the back, who had been quietly recording everything, decided this story was too big to keep inside that room. In the back of the bar, half hidden by shadows, a young woman lowered her phone, her thumb pressing stop on the record button. Her name was Camille Rios, a freelance journalist chasing scraps of stories to keep rent paid. Tonight she hadn't expected anything beyond wealthy egos and overpriced cocktails. But she had captured lightning in a bottle. On her screen sat nearly 10 minutes of footage. Martin's cruel taunt, Amara's trembling but powerful performance, Harold's shocking revelation, and the crowd's raw, unfiltered reactions. Camille's heart raced. This isn't just a story, she thought. This is history colliding in real time. The air inside the bar buzzed like a live wire. Conversations overlapped. Some argued Amara was a miracle. Others whispered words like fraud, trick, setup. But one thing was clear: nobody would ever see her as ordinary again. Martin noticed Camille in the corner, her phone slipping into her bag. His instincts, sharp and predatory, kicked in. He had built his empire by spotting threats before they grew teeth. And this woman, whoever she was, smelled like a threat. "Hey!" Martin barked, his voice carrying across the bar. "You!" In the corner. "What did you just do?" Every head turned. Camille's pulse spiked, but she forced a steady look. "I recorded the performance. The world deserves to see this." The crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement. Others widened their eyes, sensing a storm. Martin's lips curled into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. "Delete it. Now." Camille shook her head. "Not a chance. This girl, what she just did, it matters. It's not yours to erase." For a second, silence. Then Denise spoke up, clutching Amara close. "Please, don't drag her into more spotlight. She's only 12. The words cut through Camille like a blade. She understood the mother's fear, but she also knew what silence could cost. Too many stories had been buried under the weight of intimidation. Martin stepped closer, towering. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, but the entire room could hear. You think you're protecting her? You're not. You're exploiting her. That's my bloodline you're filming. The room froze. People blinked, processing. Did Martin just admit something? Or had he slipped in anger? Harold narrowed his eyes, studying Martin. Bloodline? What exactly are you saying? Martin's face hardened. Nothing. Just that parasites like her mother love to invent ties to men like me. Gasps rippled. Denise's face flushed with humiliation, but Camille lifted her phone higher, almost as if daring him. Say it again. The world's listening now. And here's the moment Martin didn't see coming. For years he controlled the narrative. Money bought silence. Power erased shame. But tonight, the truth had witnesses, and one of them had proof in her pocket. And when Camille uploaded the video minutes later, it spread faster than Martin could have ever imagined. Outside the rooftop bar, Atlanta's night air pulsed with neon and traffic. But inside Camille's phone, the world was shifting. With a trembling thumb, she hit upload. The clip landed on her social feed, tagged with words she knew would catch fire. Millionaire Taunts black girl, gets more than he bargained for. Within minutes, strangers began to share. A dozen views became hundreds. Hundreds became thousands. By the time Camille tucked her phone back into her bag, her notifications were buzzing like a swarm of bees. Meanwhile, inside the bar, Martin tried to reclaim control. Everyone calm down, he said, forcing a chuckle. This is all just a misunderstanding. A game gone too far. Let's not dramatize it. But his words fell flat. The crowd had seen too much. Some glared at him, disgusted. Others whispered furiously, phones already out, searching Camille's account to confirm what she had posted. Martin's carefully curated world of charm and intimidation was crumbling before his eyes. Amara clung to her mother, whispering, "Mama, why is everyone staring at us?" Denise stroked her daughter's hair, fighting tears. She wanted to shield her from every eye, every whisper, every screen that now carried her voice across the city. Harold stepped forward, addressing Martin directly. You should apologize. Right here. Right now. That child gave the performance of a lifetime, and all you offered was cruelty. Martin laughed, but it was hollow, brittle. Apologize? To her? Don't be absurd. But arrogance has a way of writing its own downfall. Because while Martin dismissed her, the world was already writing a new script for him. In homes across Atlanta, and soon across the nation, people pressed play. They saw the sneer in Martin's voice, the mocking challenge, the fragile start of Amara's song, and the powerful finish that shook the room. They didn't need commentary. The footage spoke for itself. Hashtags appeared. Hashtag strange fruit child. Hashtag $1,000,000 bet. Hashtag voice of history. By midnight, the clip had been seen by over 1 million people. News outlets began calling Camille, begging for rights. Back in the bar, phones buzzed louder than conversation. Martin's lawyer leaned toward him, pale and sweating. Sir, this is spiraling. The contract law, your words about the million, people are taking it seriously. Martin's jaw clenched. Don't be ridiculous. But even he could see it, the way his lawyer's hands trembled, the way the crowd's eyes burned with something dangerous, belief. When the tide of public opinion shifts, it doesn't ask for permission. It drags you under. And Martin, for the first time in years, was drowning. And just as panic set in, Amara pressed her face into her mother's side and whispered something that would change everything. With a voice so small it nearly drowned in the chaos, she said, "Mama, I think I know who he is." Denise stiffened, every muscle locking. "Baby, what do you mean?" Amara's wide eyes shifted toward Martin. I've seen his picture before. In your drawer. The one you keep locked. The man with the same eyes. Denise's breath caught. That drawer, hidden beneath bills and photographs, wasn't meant for Amara's eyes. Inside lay the fragments of a past Denise had sworn to bury. Love letters, a faded photograph, and a birth certificate with a name she refused to speak aloud. Martin's name. Denise clutched Amara tighter, panic surging. Shh, don't say that here. But Harold overheard. What did she say? His voice carried, silencing nearby whispers. The crowd leaned in again, hungry for the next revelation. Amara's small hand trembled as she pointed. Him. I think he's family. The room gasped as if a storm had cracked the ceiling. Martin's face darkened. Lies. Manipulation. She's putting words in that child's mouth. Denise's throat closed, her chest tight. She had fought for 12 years to protect Amara from this man's shadow, and now, in one fragile moment, the truth threatened to burst free. Imagine standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing one step forward will expose everything you've hidden. Your shame, your heartbreak, your sacrifice. That's where Denise stood now, trembling, with the entire room as witness. Camille raised her phone again, capturing every word. Ma'am, she said gently, is this true? People deserve to know. Denise's hands shook. She wanted to scream no, to deny it all. But when she looked into Amara's eyes, she saw the innocence of a child who deserved honesty, not silence. Her lips parted, a confession ready to spill, when Martin's lawyer rushed forward, his voice sharp with fear. This conversation ends now. Mr. Crosswell will not be interrogated by strangers in a bar. But the crowd wasn't listening to him anymore. They were listening to the tension between a mother and her child, the kind of truth no lawyer could spin away. And as Denise opened her mouth to speak, Martin shouted over her, his words slicing through the room, "She's nothing to me. Nothing." The outburst shook the room. Glasses rattled on tables. Conversations froze mid-sentence. "She's nothing to me," Martin repeated, his face red with fury, his hand gripping the back of a chair like it might steady the storm rising inside him. "Do you hear me? Nothing." Denise's composure shattered. Tears spilled as she rose, pulling Amara to her side. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "How dare you deny her? After everything." The crowd leaned closer, breathless. "Tell them, Denise," Harold urged, his voice firm but not unkind. "If what I think is true, the world deserves to know what this man has done." Denise's body shook with rage and grief. She had kept this secret to survive, to spare Amara the pain of rejection. But Martin had cornered her with his cruelty. The truth was now the only weapon she had left. She turned to the crowd, her voice breaking but clear enough for all to hear. 12 years ago, I worked in this building, cleaning floors while men in suits laughed over deals. One night, I met Martin Crosswell. He was younger then, full of charm. He promised me things. Said he cared for me. For months, I believed him. The room fell into stunned silence. Denise's hands tightened on Amara's shoulders. When I told him I was pregnant, he vanished. He cut me off, erased me from his life. And when our daughter was born, he refused to even look at her. He walked away as if she were trash. Gasps echoed across the rooftop. Some people covered their mouths. Others shook their heads in disgust. Amara's face twisted with confusion. "Mama, he's my father?" Denise's heart cracked at the word. She nodded slowly, tears streaming. "Yes, baby. He is." The weight of her confession crushed the air. Martin slammed his fist on the table. "She's lying. She's bitter. She's after money, like every other desperate woman." But Harold's sharp voice cut through his denial. "No, she's not lying. I see it now. The resemblance. the arrangement in her voice. The truth is standing right in front of you. The crowd turned on Martin, their murmurs growing sharper. Words like coward and disgrace rippled across the room. This wasn't just a scandal anymore. It was a reckoning. A powerful man stripped bare, forced to face the child he abandoned and the mother he discarded. And all of it was happening live in front of witnesses, and the world already watching online. Amara clutched her mother's arm, her small voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell me, Mama?" Denise crouched, holding her close. "Because I wanted you to feel loved, not rejected. I didn't want you to grow up thinking your father was the man who threw you away." The crowd grew restless. Phones lit the air, cameras capturing every tear, every accusation, every denial. Camille whispered to herself as she filmed, "This is bigger than a story. This is history exposing itself." Martin, cornered, his empire of pride crumbling, spat venom at Denise. "You think this will ruin me? You think one sob story can tear me down? I'm untouchable." But the look in the crowd's eyes told a different story. They weren't seeing a millionaire anymore. They were seeing a man without honor, a man who had mocked a child only to discover she was his own flesh and blood. And just as Martin prepared to storm out, his lawyer tugged his sleeve and whispered something that made his face go ghostly pale. "Sir, you can't leave. Legally, you're trapped." Martin froze as his lawyer's whisper sank in. His confident stride faltered, his face drained of color. For the first time all night, fear flickered across his features. "What do you mean I can't leave?" he hissed under his breath. The lawyer's voice trembled. "You don't understand. Your challenge, the words you spoke into that microphone, they were recorded. By law, that constitutes a binding verbal contract. And now, with witnesses and that journalist's footage, you can't claim it was a joke. You owe her the $1 million." Martin's stomach dropped. That's absurd. It was entertainment. A throwaway line. The lawyer shook his head. "Maybe in private, but you announced it publicly. And you didn't just say, 'I'll give you a prize.' You said a specific amount, $1 million. The law is clear. When an offer is made publicly with consideration and fulfilled by the other party, it is binding." The words hung heavy. Martin's reputation was already bleeding. Now his wealth, the very shield he had always hidden behind, was under threat. Arrogance had written Martin's script for years. But now his own words, the very weapon he used to humiliate, had turned against him. The man who mocked a child for sport was legally bound to reward her triumph. The crowd began to catch on. Murmurs shifted to pointed whispers. "He has to pay. He owes that little girl. It's the law." Camille, phone in hand, spoke up loud enough for all to hear. "It's already online. Millions of people have seen it. If he refuses, he's not just breaking a promise, he's breaking the law." The pressure crushed Martin's chest. He glanced at Denise, at Amara, at the faces surrounding him. They weren't dazzled by his money anymore. They were united against him. Harold stepped forward, his voice steady. "Mr. Crosswell, you tried to belittle her. Instead, she proved not only her talent but her lineage. And now, whether you like it or not, you're bound to her in blood, and in law." Denise held Amara close, her tears drying into a mask of strength. For 12 years she had endured poverty, humiliation, silence. And now the man who abandoned her stood shackled by his own arrogance. Martin's jaw clenched, his pride fighting a war he couldn't win. And as the lawyer's words echoed, the crowd began chanting a single demand: "Pay her! Pay her!" Their voices rising like a verdict he could no longer escape. The rooftop shook with the voices. "Pay her! Honor your word! Give the girl what she earned." It wasn't just noise, it was judgment. A jury of strangers delivering a sentence Martin couldn't silence with money or intimidation. Martin raised his hands, trying to command control. Enough. This is a private gathering. You don't dictate my actions. But his words only fueled them. Phones streamed live, capturing his defiance in real time. His empire wasn't a fortress anymore, it was a cage, and the crowd had the keys. Amara's eyes brimmed with tears. Mama, I don't want his money. I just want him to see me. Her words cracked the room open. Some gasped. Others clutched their chests. Even hardened skeptics softened, recognizing the raw ache of a child's plea. Denise kissed her daughter's forehead, whispering, "You're more than his recognition, baby. But tonight, he's going to face what he's done." And that's the wound Martin never anticipated. It wasn't the money that cut him open. It was the demand for acknowledgement. To be forced to see the child he discarded in front of the world was a punishment deeper than any check he could write. The lawyer tugged his sleeve again. "Sir, this is beyond us now. If you don't comply, the lawsuits, the press, they'll destroy you." Martin's nostrils flared. "They're destroying me already." Harold raised his voice, commanding the room. "You built a fortune on pride, Mr. Crosswell. Tonight pride isn't enough. Tonight you must choose. Face your responsibility, or be remembered as the coward who mocked a child and broke his word." The rooftop went silent. Every eye fixed on Martin. Even the city skyline beyond the glass seemed to wait. Camille's camera light glowed, steady as a spotlight. "The world is watching," she said softly. Martin's lips pressed into a thin line. He wanted to spit, to deny, to walk away. But deep down he knew the truth. He was cornered. And then Amara's voice, small but unshakable, pierced him. "Do you hate me that much? Just because I'm your daughter?" The question wasn't shouted. It wasn't dramatic. It was a child's pure pain, laid bare in front of hundreds, and millions more watching through screens. The rooftop air collapsed into silence. No one breathed. For 12 years, Amara had lived without her father's love. And in a single question, she forced him to confront the emptiness he had created. A question no amount of wealth could erase. And before Martin could answer, Camille's phone buzzed with a breaking notification. Amara's video had just been picked up by national news. The rooftop buzzed as Camille's phone lit up. Her screen showed the headline: "Millionaire taunts girl with song and loses everything." Gasps rippled through the crowd as she read it aloud. Within minutes, the world beyond the rooftop had joined the courtroom of public opinion. Martin's face went pale. He had spent decades curating his reputation as a ruthless but untouchable figure. Now that image was crumbling in real time. And that's the irony of legacy. It isn't always what we build with power, but what we leave behind when truth exposes us. For Martin, his legacy was shifting under his feet, and no amount of money could anchor it. Denise's hands trembled as she held Amara close. Part of her wanted to shield her daughter from the noise, but another part knew this was the justice she had prayed for. Years of silence were being cracked open, not by lawyers or judges, but by truth finding its way to light. "Sir," the lawyer whispered urgently, "if this spins further, corporate partners will walk. You'll be isolated." Martin muttered, "I am the corporation." But even he could feel it. The room no longer revolved around him. It revolved around Amara. The girl stood quiet in her mother's arms, wide-eyed as phones flashed, voices swirled, and strangers demanded her justice. For 12 years she had been invisible. Now all at once she was seen. Harold adjusted his tie, his voice cutting clear. "Mr. Crosswell, your wealth can buy silence. But tonight silence will bury you. The truth has already left this room." The crowd nodded, some recording, some weeping, some whispering prayers. Camille raised her phone again, narrating as she streamed. This is more than a broken promise. This is a broken family exposed in public view. And tonight, America is deciding what kind of man Martin Crosswell really is. Amara shifted slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. Mama, why do they all care now when they didn't care before? Denise kissed her hair. Because sometimes, sweetheart, the world only wakes up when it's forced to look. And that was the weight pressing down on Martin. Not just the demand for money, but the undeniable truth that his blood, his child, his own legacy was staring him in the face. He couldn't hide behind contracts or boardrooms. His daughter was his judge now. The chants softened, turning into murmurs. The crowd seemed to hold its breath. Then, in the quiet, Amara lifted her chin and asked the question that froze even the cameras. Do you want me to carry your name, or should I bury it forever? The rooftop went still. Martin's eyes darted around, desperate for escape. But no door, no stairwell, no lawyer could shield him from the force of that question. Carry my name, or bury it forever? Amara repeated softly, but her words echoed like thunder. The crowd stirred. Some gasped. Others whispered, she deserves it. She deserves the truth. That's what made the moment unbearable for Martin. Not the chants, not the headlines, not the threats of lawsuits. It was the undeniable clarity of a child's voice asking the question no father ever wants to hear. Denise's lips quivered. She had dreamed of this moment for years, rehearsed it in silence, wondered if he would ever face it. But now, watching her daughter's courage, she realized this wasn't her fight anymore. It belonged to Amara. Harold stepped forward, his voice firm but tender. Mr. Crosswell, bloodlines are not contracts. You can walk away from business deals. You cannot walk away from this child. Whether you honor her or abandon her again, that choice will be your true legacy. Martin's fists clenched. He had built empires, bent governments, silenced rivals. But here he was, undone by a girl whose only weapon was her voice. Camille's stream buzzed with comments flying across the screen. She's braver than all of us. Give her the name. Give her what she deserves. We're watching Martin. Don't you dare walk away. Martin's lawyer leaned in. Sir, your silence is killing us. Even if you don't care about her, think strategically. Acknowledging her might salvage your reputation. Martin's lips twisted. Reputation? Or surrender? The lawyer didn't answer. He didn't need to. Everyone knew the truth. Martin was cornered by the very words he once wielded carelessly. Amara's small hands balled into fists at her sides. Her voice cracked but didn't falter. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for your mansion. I'm asking if I matter. That's it. The room shifted. What had begun as entertainment had transformed into a trial of the heart. The millionaire wasn't fighting a contract anymore. He was fighting the haunting question of whether he had the courage to see his own child. And in that moment, the man who prided himself on control discovered the truth. Some battles aren't fought in boardrooms or banks. They are fought in silence, with the eyes of a child who refuses to look away. The rooftop air grew heavy. All waited for his answer. Martin finally spoke, voice strained, brittle. You already carry my blood. My name, he paused, fighting himself. My name is yours if you want it. The crowd gasped. Some cheered, others wept. Phones shook as streams erupted with reactions. Amara's tears spilled, but she stood taller. I don't want it because of your money. I want it because I'm tired of being nobody. Denise held her hand, her face fierce. And tonight, baby, you are somebody. As the crowd roared, another phone buzzed with a fresh update. The story had just been picked up by international outlets. The world wasn't just watching anymore. The world was demanding justice. The rooftop no longer felt like a party. The chandeliers still glowed, the skyline still glittered, but the air had shifted. This wasn't a celebration anymore, it was a tribunal. Phones buzzed across the room as alerts poured in: CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera. The headlines echoed the same theme: millionaire humiliated by daughter's song. Martin stood rigid, his expensive suit suddenly feeling like armor pierced with holes. He had built his life on control, but tonight, every camera, every whisper, every pair of eyes shredded that illusion. And that's the cruelty of truth. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't wait until you're ready. It simply floods the room, transforming it into a mirror you can't escape. Denise gripped Amara's hand. For years she had been invisible, a single mother cast aside. But now in this room she was unshakable. Her daughter had dragged the truth into the light, and Denise no longer needed to bow her head. Harold addressed the crowd, his voice cutting through the chaos. This is no longer about a dare. It's about responsibility. This child has carried a secret no one should bear. And tonight, she gave voice to the pain of millions who've been silenced by power. The crowd nodded. Some clapped. Some whispered prayers. Even those who once laughed at Amara's trembling steps now bowed to her courage. Camille, live streaming, spoke with a fire in her tone. People are watching from around the globe. They're calling her a hero. Hashtags are already trending. Hashtag Amara song. Hashtag millionaire exposed. Martin's chest tightened. For decades, he had been the one writing the narrative: press releases, charity galas, magazine features. Now the narrative had slipped into hands he couldn't control. He tried to speak, but his words came out jagged. This is a circus. You people don't understand what you're doing. But the crowd didn't hear a leader. They heard a man stripped bare. Amara looked up at him, her small voice carrying across the silence. You said I'd never matter. But now the whole world is listening to me. It was the strike he couldn't parry. The room had transformed, yes, but not for Martin. For Amara. She was no longer the trembling child with a borrowed dress and shaking hands. She was the girl who silenced a millionaire, the daughter who forced a father to face himself, the voice that carried farther than his wealth ever could. And then Camille's phone flashed with breaking footage. Protesters were already gathering outside Martin's corporate headquarters, chanting Amara's name. The rooftop erupted as Camille showed the footage. Hundreds of people outside Martin's glass towers, holding signs scribbled in haste. Justice for Amara. Fathers don't abandon daughters. Pay her. Respect her. The crowd on the rooftop gasped. Some cheered. Others reached for their own phones, sending the story spiraling even faster. For years, Martin's towers had been symbols of his strength. Tonight, they became symbols of his shame. His empire was no longer a monument to success. It was a stage for justice. Martin staggered back. This is madness. It'll pass. The news cycle spins fast. Tomorrow they'll forget. But Harold shook his head. No, Martin. They won't forget. Because this isn't just about you. This is about every child abandoned, every promise broken, every person who's been told they don't matter. Amara gave them a song, and they're singing it with her. Denise wrapped her arm around her daughter. Her eyes glistened with tears, but her posture was firm. For the first time in 12 years she didn't feel powerless. Amara tilted her head, watching the screen, her lips parting in awe. They're saying my name. Her voice cracked on the word my. Not in weakness but in wonder. Camille smiled through her own tears. Sweetheart, they're not just saying it. They're carrying it. The lawyer pulled Martin aside, desperation dripping from every word. Sir, listen to me, this is beyond damage control. If you don't act, sponsors will walk, boards will dissolve, lawsuits will bury you. The only way forward is acknowledgement. Public acknowledgement. Martin's face contorted. His pride clawed at him, begging him to resist. But the walls were closing in. His silence wasn't power anymore, it was poison. Amara stepped forward, her small frame steady, her eyes unblinking. You don't have to love me. But you will not erase me. The rooftop stilled again. The child who walked in trembling now spoke like a judge. And that was her victory, not in dollars, not in contracts, not in headlines. Her victory was refusing to vanish. Her victory was forcing the man who rejected her to see her, if only for a moment, in front of the whole world. Martin tried to speak, but the words tangled. For the first time his voice cracked. Amara. Her name left his lips like glass shattering. A sound no one had ever heard before. A sound that would haunt him long after the night ended. The crowd reacted, gasps, tears, applause. Some hugged strangers. Others whispered, "Did you hear that?" He said her name. Denise buried her face in her hands. She had carried the weight of silence for years. Now, even if nothing else came, her daughter had been recognized. But outside, the protests grew louder and new headlines flashed. Politicians and activists were weighing in. This wasn't just one man's scandal anymore. It was a national debate. The rooftop slowly quieted. The chants outside faded into a distant echo, but their weight lingered in the room. Martin sat slumped in his chair, the bourbon glass abandoned, the fire gone from his eyes. For years he had mocked weakness, but tonight weakness had swallowed him whole. His empire remained, but the man himself was hollow. Narrator voice, and isn't that the truth of arrogance? It builds castles of glass, thinking they'll last forever. But the smallest stone, one song, one voice, one child, can bring the walls down. Amara stood tall beside her mother. She didn't smile, she didn't gloat. She simply breathed, steady and sure. Denise kissed her daughter's forehead. Baby, you did what I never thought possible. You made him see. Amara whispered back, but Mama, was it enough? That question hung heavy. Because recognition, once denied, doesn't erase the years it was missing. It doesn't erase nights of hunger, loneliness, or rejection. Harold placed a gentle hand on Amara's shoulder. You don't need him to make you whole. You proved that tonight. But maybe, just maybe, he needs you to remind him what it means to be human. The crowd, once hungry for spectacle, now looked inward. Some wiped tears. Others held their children a little tighter. And that was the silence after the storm, not empty but heavy. A silence that forced everyone in that room to ask, how many Amaras have we ignored? How many voices have we silenced because we thought they didn't belong? And as Amara turned to leave, Camille leaned in and whispered, You know this isn't the end, right? Tomorrow the whole world will want to hear from you. The next morning, Amara's face was everywhere. News anchors called her the girl who sang truth into power. Politicians argued, activists rallied, artists posted covers of her performance. The world wasn't just telling her story, it was echoing her song. Denise watched from their small kitchen, the glow of the TV bouncing off the cracked tiles. She looked at her daughter, not as a victim but as a victor. In one night, a child became a mirror for a nation. Her voice wasn't just melody, it was memory. A reminder of pain buried, of promises broken, of resilience too strong to silence. But Amara didn't chase the cameras. She sat quietly, her notebook open, sketching words for new songs. Not for money, not for fame, but because her voice had found freedom, and once freed, it refused to go back. As for Martin, his empire survived, but his name was forever tied to the night he tried to humiliate a little girl and ended up bowing to her. His silence, once powerful, was now his prison. Narrator voice, and that is how arrogance dies, not with applause, but with the haunting echo of the truth it tried to bury. The world would move on to other headlines. But for those who were there, for those who watched live, and for those who felt the sting of Amara's song in their bones, it would never fade. The story had ended, yes, but the lesson? That still echoed. So now I'll ask you, the listener, what would you have done in that room? Would you have laughed with Martin? Or stood with Amara? And more importantly, how many Amaras are still waiting for someone to listen? If this story touched you, don't let it stop here. Share it. Talk about it. And subscribe to Buzz Stories, where hope always finds a voice, even when the world tries to silence it. Because some songs never end.